It's from the Washington Post, and it's Monitoring America, it's called. It says 9 years after the terrorist attacks of 2001, the United States is assembling a vast domestic intelligence apparatus to collect information about Americans. Well, they've been doing that even before 9/11, and they really stepped up right after 9/11, as we know. So what they mean, it is in the process of assembling a vast domestic intelligence apparatus. Anyway, it says using the FBI, local police, state homeland security officers or offices, and military criminal investigators. The system, by far the largest and most technologically sophisticated in the nation's history, collects, stores, and analyzes information about thousands of U.S. citizens. Actually, it's millions. It's everybody. And residents, many of whom have not been accused of any wrongdoing. I'll say yet, because they'll find something down the road on everybody if they want. You know, you're breaking laws every day. There's thousands of laws on the books that you don't even know about. The government's goal is to have every state and local law enforcement agency in the country feed information to Washington to buttress the work of the FBI, which is in charge of terrorism investigations in the United States. By the way, they've joined it with Canada, so they share all the data together about all their citizens. Other democracies, Britain and Israel, it's funny how they call them democracies, Britain and Israel, to name two, are well acquainted with such domestic security measures, so that means it's okay if they're doing it, then we should do the same thing. But for the United States, the sum of these new activities represents a new level of governmental scrutiny. And it says, this localized intelligence apparatus is part of a larger top secret America. Here they are publishing in the papers, Top secret, yeah. Created since attacks. In July, the Washington Post described an alternative geography of the United States, one that has grown so large, unwieldy, and secretive that no one knows how much money it costs, how many people it employs, or how many programs exist within it. By the way, they also have snoops in every street, by the way. That's official. They come in, pretend they're one of you, or they're retired or something like that, and they collect data. They also use the Masons for that as well, and the Eastern Star. They've been doing that long before 9/11. Today's story, along with the related material on the Post's website, examines how Top Secret America plays out at the local level. It describes a web of 4,058 federal, state, and local organizations, each with its own counterterrorism responsibilities and jurisdictions. This is going to be worse when it comes all down, I'll tell you. A lot worse than the STASI, or it was in the Soviet Union. It really is an awful lot worse. It really is going to be something amazing. At least 935 of these organizations have been created since the 2001 attacks, or became involved in counterterrorism for the first time after 9/11. The months-long investigation, based on nearly 100 interviews and 1,000 documents, found that technologies and techniques honed for use on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan have migrated into the hands of law enforcement agencies in America. I read an article 10 years ago in there where they were talking about the biggest sales that weaponry had. Now it was to domestic law enforcement and so on, years ago. The FBI is building a database with the names and certain personal information, such as employment history, of thousands of U.S. citizens and residents whom a local police officer or a fellow citizen believed to be acting suspiciously. Do you understand that's enough probably one day to get you into the gulag and beaten up and tortured, then they kill you? Because that will come along, you know. You can't stop this. I said years ago, once the U.S. takes off and they got the beast over in the Middle East slaughtering folk like crazy with a debased generation, I said the beast comes home, and guess what? It's already here. It's just gnashing away, just dying to get at you. I'm not kidding either. I'm not just creating fear and hype about this. This is standard history. It is accessible to an increasing number of local law enforcement and military criminal investigators, and increasing concerns that it could somehow end up in the public domain. And seeking to learn more about Islam and terrorism, some law enforcement agencies have hired as trainers self-described experts whose extremist views on Islam and terrorism are considered inaccurate. Well, I wonder where they came from, and counterproductive by the FBI and U.S. intelligence agencies. The Department of Homeland Security sends its state and local partners intelligence reports with little meaningful guidance, and state reports have sometimes inappropriately reported on lawful meetings. Yeah, they go into poetry clubs and raid them and, bring them into slammer. Waterboard them. And all they get out them is rhymes, and they must be a code or something. Anyway, it says, in cities across Tennessee and across the nation, local agencies are using sophisticated equipment and techniques to keep an eye out for terrorist threats and to watch Americans in the process. It's got a lot of links to this particular site, and I'll put it up at the end of the show with the data and so on for you to look up for yourselves if you want to. If you don't know it all already, anyway, I'm sure you do. It says the need to identify U.S.-born or naturalized citizens who are planning violent attacks is more urgent than ever, U.S. intelligence officials say. This month's FBI sting operation involving a Baltimore construction worker who, and it says, allegedly planned, didn't do it, but planned to bomb a Maryland military recruiting station is the latest example. Well, they set these things up in advance and they get patsies, you see. That's what they do on the internet. It followed a similar arrest of a Somali-born naturalized U.S. citizen allegedly seeking to detonate a bomb near a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Portland, Oregon. There have been nearly 24 other cases just this year. Well, I don't really believe it. The old view is that if we fight terrorists abroad, we won't have to fight them here. Is just that. The old view, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napoleon, oh, that's a Freudian slip again, told police and firefighters recently. And then the Obama administration heralds. This is really popular today in the media. They use little words that come up for a while. They use them for a while and they drop away again. But everything's heralding something today. So the Obama administration heralds this local approach as a much-needed evolution in the way the country confronts terrorism. That's why you're now in the Soviet Union, folks. You see. So Top Secret America is a project 2 years in the making that describes a huge security build-up in the U.S. after the September 11th, 2001 attacks. And as I say, it's just another massive funding really to all these different agencies, right down to civilian agencies that are all spying on their local citizenry and so on. And they can't even get the actual cost of it, except some of it has been published. 31 billion in grants, for instance, was published in 2003. And of course, I guess everybody with a bit of psychopathic ability in them will get right in there and spy on their community for a share in the pie. And then they'll have to, obviously, this is what happens to intelligence. They have to write reports that they've got somebody under surveillance all the time. And they make this stuff up. But it's on paper, and anything coming down, eventually they grab the poor schmuck that's been singled out, and this happened again across the Soviet Union and elsewhere in history. This is hell on earth coming down, and the folk don't even recognize it at all. They don't.